My name is Marissa Quinn, and I'm 21 years old. People think silence in a house means peace, but they're wrong. It echoes in the walls and in your chest until you feel like you could scream and nobody would turn their head. That's the silence I grew up in. It shattered at 11:51 p.m. My brother Hunter stood over $48,000 of smashed antique wood reeking of bourbon. My mother didn't look at him. She looked at me. "You take the blame," she commanded, "or you lose everything." Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't give them the satisfaction of a single tear. I turned on my heel and walked up the grand staircase, my steps silent on the plush carpet. The door to my room clicked shut and the sound was final. It sounded like a vault closing. I didn't pack clothes. Clothes are replaceable fabric. I packed leverage. I pulled my violin case from the closet, checking the humidity gauge. Then I went to the fireproof safe under my desk. Inside were 3 external hard drives. To my parents, these were just backups. To me, they were ammunition. 3 years of Hunter's raw audition tapes. 3 years of project files. The metadata on every single track proved who had actually played the notes. I wrapped them in bubble wrap and placed them next to my rosin. For a moment I paused, looking at the empty space on my desk where family photos used to sit. For 21 years, I had convinced myself that my silence was a form of loyalty. I thought that by staying quiet, by fixing their mistakes, by editing Hunter's mediocrity into brilliance, I was paying my rent for existing in this family. I thought I was the glue holding the Quinn legacy together. Standing there in the dark, the realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I wasn't the glue. I was the paint. I was the fresh coat of whitewash they slapped over the mold to keep the neighbors from noticing the rot. I hadn't been keeping them afloat by being good. I had been keeping them afloat by hiding their decay. And the thing about rot is the moment you stop hiding it, the structural integrity vanishes. Breaking this chain wasn't just about leaving. It was about letting the world see the cracks I had spent a lifetime filling with my own dignity. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed the only light in the room. I didn't write a goodbye letter. That would imply I cared about their reaction. Instead, I logged into the conservatory portal. The transfer acceptance to the Vienna Academy of Music had been sitting in my inbox for 4 months. I had deferred it twice, paralyzed by guilt. Tonight, the guilt was gone. I clicked accept. The confirmation banner flashed green. Immediate transfer approved. Next came the financials. My parents thought they controlled me because they paid the tuition. They forgot that I had been teaching private lessons since I was 16. I logged into the bank. I unlinked my personal savings from the joint family oversight account. I transferred $14,000, every cent I had earned, into a new secure account I had opened last week on a hunch. It took exactly 40 minutes to dismantle my life in New York. I zipped the case. I walked past Hunter's room. I could hear him sobbing through the door, the loud, performative weeping of a golden child who knows he will be rescued. Not this time. I walked out the front door into the biting winter air. The Uber was waiting at the curb. As I slid into the back seat, I pulled out my phone one last time. I didn't send a text. I opened my contacts, selected my mother, my father, and Hunter. I hit block on each one. The digital silence that followed was instant. It didn't feel hollow. It felt like the first deep breath I had taken in years. The car pulled away, and I didn't look back at the house. I was already gone. As the city lights of New York faded into a blurry grid beneath the plane wing, the adrenaline finally began to recede. In its place, a cold, sharp clarity settled over me. To the outside world, my departure looked like a tantrum. A jealous older sister fleeing because her brother broke a toy. But the cello Hunter smashed wasn't just an instrument. It was a prop, and I was the only one who knew the secret that kept the Quinn dynasty from collapsing. Hunter couldn't play. Not at the level the world thought he could. He had the look, the charisma, the brooding artist aesthetic that donors loved. But he lacked the discipline. For 3 years I had been the ghost in the machine. Every audition tape that got him into Sterling, every recording that won him the Virtuoso grant, every digital submission that built his fame, it wasn't him, it was me. I would wait until the house was asleep. Then I would creep into the soundproof studio in the basement. I wasn't a cellist by trade, but I was a musician by blood. I learned his repertoire measure by measure, forcing my fingers to adapt to the thicker strings, the different bow weight. I recorded the tracks. Then I spent hours in front of my monitors, splicing, editing, layering. I adjusted the EQ to mask the slight differences in our vibrato. I edited out my own breathing. I handed him the finished files like a completed homework assignment, and he would submit them with a grin, never asking how many hours it took or how much my fingers bled. I used to wonder how my parents could be so blind. How could two trained musicians not hear the difference? How could they watch him fumble through scales in the living room and then listen to a flawless concerto on the speakers and not ask questions? For a long time, I thought it was just love. I thought they were blinded by affection for their son. But sitting in the dark of a red-eye flight cruising at 30,000 feet, I finally understood the true architecture of our family. They weren't blind. They were complicit. They didn't love Hunter. They consumed him. In the psychology of toxic families, Hunter was the golden child, the shiny object they held up to the world to validate their own existence. He was an extension of my father's ego and my mother's vanity. If he failed, they failed. And me, I was the glass child. Transparent, sturdy, necessary, but invisible. They looked right through me to see him. They didn't protect him because they believed in his talent. They protected him because his failure would be a reflection on them. I was just the scaffolding holding up their billboard. I was the insurance policy that ensured the show went on. By forcing me to take the blame for the smashed cello, they weren't just asking me to cover for his temper. They were banking on the fact that I would never shatter. They thought I was made of bulletproof glass. They forgot that even the strongest glass breaks if you hit it hard enough. And when it breaks, it cuts. I wasn't just leaving a toxic home. I was taking the talent with me. The ghost was finally walking out of the machine, and without me, the music was about to stop. I landed in Vienna just as the sun was bleeding over the Alps, painting the tarmac in shades of bruised purple and gold. My phone, which I had turned back on solely to access my digital boarding pass for the connecting train, began to vibrate. It wasn't a ring, it was a seizure. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications that had piled up while I was crossing the Atlantic. This was the noise of the abandoned. I didn't answer. I didn't feel a spike of adrenaline. I felt the cool detachment of a scientist observing a chemical reaction she had predicted months ago. I walked to a quiet corner of the terminal, ordered a black coffee, and opened the floodgates. Hunter was the first to break. His voicemails started at 7:30 in the morning New York time. The first one was confusion. "Marissa, where are you? The coffee maker is empty." By 8:15, confusion had curdled into panic. "I can't find the external drive, the one with the concerto files. Stop playing around." By 9, the panic had ignited into pure, unfiltered rage. "You're ruining my life," he screamed, his voice cracking in that way it always did when he was terrified. "The showcase is in 2 days. If you don't send those files right now, I swear to God I will tell Mom and Dad you stole them." I sipped my coffee. The irony was rich. He was threatening to accuse me of stealing my own work, the work he had claimed was his. Then came my mother. Danielle Quinn didn't scream. She operated with the precision of a surgeon cutting out a tumor. Her email subject line read, "Emergency mental health crisis." The body of the email was a masterpiece of gaslighting. "Marissa, we are so worried. Hunter told us you left in the middle of the night. We know you've been under a lot of stress lately, and we think you might be having a manic episode. Please come home. We can get you the help you need. We won't be angry about the cello if you just come home and fix this." She was building a narrative. She knew that if I didn't return to play the ghost, Hunter would fail. So she had to delegitimize my departure. If I was crazy, then my absence wasn't a protest. It was a symptom. If I was unstable, then nothing I said about the fraud could be trusted. My father, Charles, took the legal route. His text was short, brutal, and entirely expected. "You took the Volvo. That car is registered to the family estate. If it is not in the driveway by noon, I am reporting it stolen." I almost smiled. I had anticipated this 3 months ago. I opened my cloud drive and pulled up the bill of sale, the title transfer I had forced him to sign when I paid off the loan with my teaching money and the insurance policy in my name. I forwarded the documents to his personal email with no subject line. The threat evaporated instantly. But they weren't done. If they couldn't control me, they would control the audience. I opened Instagram. Hunter had posted a black square with a caption that dripped with performative vulnerability. "Family is supposed to be your anchor, but sometimes they act like the storm. Please pray for my sister. She's battling some demons right now, and we are just trying to get her safe." It was a brilliant move. He was preempting his failure at the showcase. If he bombed, it wouldn't be because he lacked talent. It would be because he was too distraught over his sick sister to perform. They were using my breakdown as a shield for his mediocrity. I closed the app. I didn't engage. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't scream into the void. Engaging would imply that their narrative mattered. Instead, I picked up my violin case and walked toward the train station. They were fighting a war for public opinion in a house I no longer lived in. I was fighting for my life, and my weapon was silence. I sat in a cafe in Vienna, the coffee cooling untouched beside my laptop. My phone was still buzzing with the relentless rhythm of my family's panic, but I didn't look at it. I didn't engage with the gaslighting or the threats. Engaging is what victims do. I was done being a victim. I was now a plaintiff. I opened Skype and dialed the one number I knew I could trust. Professor Angela answered on the first ring. She was the head of the string department at Sterling, a woman of iron discipline and sharp intellect. She was also the only person who had ever suspected the truth about Hunter's sudden rise to mediocrity. I didn't waste time with pleasantries. I told her everything. The smashed cello, the ultimatum, the flight to Vienna. When I finished, there was a long silence on the line. Then she let out a breath that sounded like a curse. She didn't offer sympathy. She offered strategy. She told me to check my email. She was introducing me to a copyright attorney in New York, a man who specialized in intellectual property disputes for composers. 10 minutes later, I was on a conference call. I didn't cry. There was no need to explain the childhood trauma or my mother's narcissism. I simply spoke the language of business. I uploaded 3 files to the secure server. He provided the raw session files from Hunter's audition tapes, the metadata showing my user login on the recording software, and the final mixed tracks that had been submitted to the grant committee. The lawyer looked at the data. He didn't see a family dispute. He saw theft. He saw unauthorized use of creative property. He saw fraud. He drafted the document while we spoke. It wasn't a letter of resignation from the family. It was a formal cease and desist order. The language was beautiful in its brutality. It stated that I, Marissa Quinn, was the sole creator and performer of the audio recordings currently being used to represent Hunter Quinn. It formally revoked any implied consent for their use. It demanded the immediate removal of these tracks from his website, his portfolio, and any pending applications. But I added one specific clause: the kill switch. I knew Hunter had applied for the prestigious Virtuoso grant. I knew the application deadline had closed yesterday. If he won, he got $50,000 and a European tour. If he won based on my playing, it wasn't just lying. It was federal wire fraud. I typed the accompanying email myself. I addressed it to my father, copying my mother and Hunter. The subject line was simply, "Legal notice regarding intellectual property." The body of the email was short. "You have 24 hours. You will withdraw Hunter's application for the Virtuoso grant immediately. You will cite personal reasons. If you do not withdraw by noon tomorrow, New York time, I will forward the raw session files, including the audio of Hunter cursing because he couldn't hit the high notes, directly to the grant committee chairman. I will also release them to the public domain." I attached the cease and desist. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen until it vanished. I didn't feel the shaking trembling of a daughter defying her father. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of a CEO firing an embezzler. They wanted to threaten me with the police for taking a car I paid for. Fine. I would threaten them with the destruction of the one thing they valued more than their own children, their reputation. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in 20 years, I wasn't the one running out of time. They were. I thought the cease and desist was the end of it. I thought threatening to expose his incompetence was the nuclear option. I was wrong. It was just the opening argument. 2 hours after I sent the email, my lawyer called me back. His voice had changed. He didn't sound like a copyright attorney anymore. He sounded like a prosecutor staring at a smoking gun. He told me to check my secure inbox again. He had pulled the full metadata from the Virtuoso grant application before they could scrub it. I opened the file. It wasn't an audio track this time. It was a PDF. Section 4 of the application required the submission of an original composition. Hunter had submitted a piece titled "Elegy for the Lost." I stared at the sheet music on my screen. I didn't need to play it to know what it sounded like. I knew every note. I knew the tempo changes in the second movement. I knew the impossible double stop in the bridge. I knew it because I had written it. I composed it during my sophomore year, scribbling the notes on napkins in the cafeteria while Hunter was out partying. It was on my private drive. He hadn't just stolen my performance. He had stolen my mind. But that wasn't the kill shot. The kill shot was the math. I looked at the grant details. The Virtuoso Prize came with a cash stipend of $50,000. Then I thought about the smashed cello back in New York. The antique instrument Hunter had destroyed in his drunken rage was insured for $48,000. But insurance doesn't cover intentional destruction by the owner. That meant my parents were on the hook for the full amount. The pieces clicked together with the terrifying precision of a bear trap. They weren't just pushing Hunter to win for the glory. They were pushing him to win because they were broke. They had already mentally spent the grant money. They needed the $50,000 to pay for the $48,000 mistake Hunter had made. They were robbing Peter to pay Paul, but Peter was a federal arts endowment and Paul was an antique instrument dealer. My lawyer confirmed it. By submitting a stolen composition across state lines to secure funding from a federally backed organization, they hadn't just committed plagiarism. They had committed wire fraud. The penalty wasn't just disqualification. It was prison time. I sat back in my chair. The anger that had been fueling me for 48 hours suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, dark amusement. My parents had spent their lives trying to curate the perfect image of a wealthy, artistic dynasty. Now, in their desperation to protect that image, they had handed me the power to dismantle it completely. They thought they were playing a game of family politics. They didn't realize they had just walked onto a felony crime scene. And I was the only witness. The night of the showcase arrived in New York at 8 o'clock in the evening. In Vienna, it was 2 in the morning. I was wide awake, sitting in the dark of my rental apartment, my phone resting on the table like a detonator. I knew the schedule. At 8:15, Hunter was due to walk onto the stage of the Sterling Conservatory Grand Hall. At 8:16, he would signal the sound booth to trigger the backing track, the complex orchestral arrangement I had layered with my own cello guide track to keep him in tune. At 8:10, my phone lit up. It wasn't my father. It wasn't Hunter. It was an unknown number, but I knew who it was. I had blocked every other avenue of communication. This was desperation finding a workaround. I slid the green icon to answer. I didn't say hello. I just listened. The sound of ragged breathing filled the line. Then my mother's voice, unrecognizable in its hysteria. "Marissa, please. Please, you have to help us. The files are corrupted. The sound guy says they're locked. He can't play without them." I said nothing. I could hear the background noise on her end, the low hum of a crowd settling into their seats, the tuning of instruments in the pit, the sound of a deadline arriving. "He's going to go out there and he's going to freeze," she sobbed. Her composure, usually lacquered on like armor, was gone. "If he fails, the grant committee will pull the funding." "We spent it, Marissa. We already paid the antique dealer. If we don't get that check, your father goes to prison. We lose the house. We lose everything. Just send the password. Just unlock the drive. I'll do anything. I'll apologize. I'll tell them it was you. Just save him." For 21 years, I had waited for her to protect me with that same ferocity. I had waited for her to panic when I was hurt, to beg when I was mistreated. It never happened. Her fear was a resource reserved exclusively for the golden child. I looked at the time. 8:14. "Mom," I said. My voice was steady quiet, the volume of a ghost. "Marissa, thank God," she gasped. "Just tell me the code." "You spent my entire life teaching me one lesson," I said. "You taught me that my job was to be unseen, to be the support beam that no one applauds. You wanted me to be invisible, Mom. So tonight, I am." "No, Marissa, don't." I ended the call. I didn't watch the live stream. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. I could picture Hunter walking onto the stage, the spotlight hitting his face, blinding him. I could picture him raising the bow, waiting for the safety net of my recording to catch him. I could picture the silence stretching out seconds, turning into hours as the sound booth remained dark. There would be no music tonight. There would only be the truth standing alone under a spotlight, holding a bow he didn't know how to use. The silence in that hall would be deafening, but for the first time, it wouldn't be mine. The fallout was immediate and absolute. Hunter never played a single note. He stood on that stage for 2 agonizing minutes while the audience shifted in their seats, realizing that the prodigy was a fraud. When the curtain finally came down, it didn't just end the performance. It ended the Quinn dynasty. The Virtuoso Grant Committee launched an investigation the next morning. My parents sold the house 3 months later to cover the legal fees and the restitution for the antique cello. They live in a small apartment in New Jersey now, surrounded by the unsold inventory of their vanity. I don't visit. I don't call. I simply let them exist in the reality they created. In Vienna, the winter is cold, but the air is clear. I have a small apartment near the conservatory with high ceilings and a practice room that is soundproofed. For the first time in my life, the silence inside a room doesn't feel hollow. It feels heavy with potential. It feels like a blank canvas waiting for paint. I picked up my violin yesterday. I didn't set up a recording rig. I didn't open editing software to splice my talent into someone else's name. I just played. I played the elegy I wrote when I was 19, and for the first time, the notes belonged entirely to me. There was no ghost in the room, just a soloist. When my first professional paycheck arrived from a legitimate symphony that hired me for my own skill, I didn't buy a car or a designer bag. I contacted a lawyer and set up a trust. I called it the Glass Scholarship. It provides full tuition and living expenses for students at the Sterling Conservatory who demonstrate exceptional talent but lack family support. It is specifically designed for the siblings of high needs or golden children, the ones who are expected to shrink so someone else can shine. People often talk about revenge as a destructive force. They think it's about burning down the enemy's house. But looking at the bank transfer confirmation for the first scholarship recipient, I realized they are wrong. True justice isn't about destruction. It is about construction. It is about the justice of the sower. I didn't just escape the fire. I built a ladder so others could climb out behind me. My parents wanted to bury my talent to fertilize their son's ego. Instead, I took that talent and planted a seed that will outlast their entire legacy. On my mantle next to my acceptance letter from the Vienna Philharmonic, I keep the hard drive containing the raw files. I don't keep it as leverage anymore. I keep it as documentation. It is proof that I wasn't crazy, I wasn't jealous, and I wasn't weak. I was used. And then, I was free. I walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights, reflecting off the Danube. I am 21 years old. My name is Marissa Quinn, and the only silence in my life now is the breath I take before I begin to play. If you've ever had to walk away to save your own voice like this video, share it with the glass children in your life who need to know they can break the glass without cutting themselves, and subscribe for more stories of silence breaking into sound.